John, I'm sure it's been a long day for you today, and whilst your job is talking to people, it's a fascinating little project here. Explain a bit more for our viewers.
Well, there have been books about Brian Johnson, of course, biographies. He wrote his own autobiography. Well, that's pretty ancient now. But it struck me that there's never been a book written about Brian from the perspective of someone who's actually worked with him. And given that he was the man really who liberated me as a broadcaster, who really taught me what broadcasting is all about, I felt it was the right thing to do, and quite a challenging thing to do, and a fun thing to do. And I really have had a lot of fun doing it. And I was very lucky when I first met Brian. I was first out as BBC cricket correspondent. I was 30 years old. I'd done a bit of radio, a little bit of newspaper, a little bit of this and that, and suddenly I was the BBC's cricket correspondent, sitting alongside one of the great radio broadcasters that there's been. I mean, that's not over-egging Brian at all. He was a wonderful live broadcaster, entertainer, communicator, and so to sit alongside him and watch him doing it was really what has helped me do what I'm doing now. And I'm absolutely convinced if it hadn't been for Brian Johnson, I wouldn't be as successful, perhaps that's the right word, or as the sort of commentator that I am today, put it that way.
Very much a team effort, as you say, and it's all about partnerships, as in cricket, people working together. What sort of things along the years would you say you've picked up that have helped you, as you say, become where you are now?
From Brian's perspective, it's certainly that you must entertain, you must communicate, you must describe, you must never grumble, never complain. You could be in a pretty horrible old commentary box somewhere, dirty and grubby and with disgusting toilets out the back, but you mustn't say that because people switch you off. Brian's secret was to make cricket fun, and I always feel that if people through listening to me feel that they like cricket, they want to go and discover more about cricket, they want to go and watch some cricket, or at least they'll tune in again tomorrow, then I've done my job. That's what a commentator should do. You should make it sound appealing and fun and entertaining and exciting, but while being honest as well. If you simply go on there and say, this is wonderful, this is fantastic, this is the best game I've ever seen, you'll very soon be rumbled. So you have to keep context. If the cricket's rubbish, you say it's rubbish. But then you have to step up a gear as a commentator and even make rubbish sound entertaining and interesting and reason to listen. So those, I think, are the biggest challenges, the biggest things you come across as a commentator.
There's also a mix between ex-players and non-ex-players, if you like, or people who have played to a level of cricket. Do you find those things are sort of allow sort of the commentary to come over with different perspectives?
Well, I do think you need to have played cricket. You don't need to play Test cricket or even first-class cricket, but you have to have played cricket to a level, I think, to commentate on it properly, to really know what's going on out there, to have a feel for it. Brian Johnston was Oxford seconds, Eton seconds, played lots of club cricket. He wasn't anything special, but he'd been out there and done it to an extent. I think he'd done much sledging, I don't suppose. but he could therefore describe cricket and take people out there, and if something was happening, he would know what was happening. But I do think there needs to be a mix. I think ex-players can be quite a cynical bunch. I think we're probably the worst people to talk to about 50 overs cricket, for instance. We see a lot of it, and a lot of it's not very exciting. And I think particularly those who have also played quite a lot of it as well, perhaps have got to that level perhaps before the enthusiasts will get there, put it that way. You need a mix, a mix of people who simply love cricket, haven't played it very much and will love it to their dying day, but you need to mix that with the experience, the opinions, of people who have been out there and actually played at the highest level, and somewhere between there you'll get the right balance, I think.
It's definitely a long time on the pitch, I know, having played a little bit myself as well, and it does allow for, I think, the whole game of cricket to be such a rich and varied activity, and I suppose this is something that you were really pleased that working with Brian, this definitely came across in the commentaries.
Well, it does, and it's why Test cricket wins too, isn't it? I mean, I hate the fact that perhaps we're getting beyond that stage now, but there was certainly about 3 or 4 years ago, a situation where if you rather rubbish 2020 cricket and said, I love Test cricket, you were seen as a bit of an old fuddy-duddy, an old traditionalist and out of the times, But that's not true. And people are realising now that 2020's got its place, although they're overkilling it, and that really is an issue for me now. They're killing the golden goose. But people, yeah, okay, they're excited by it and they like it, but they're getting back to appreciating that Test cricket's what it really is all about. The ebb and the flow and how things can change. Which in 2020 cricket, and of course the shorter cricket you get, of course, is less likely to happen. So yeah, Test cricket is the pinnacle. And as long as we still have the opportunity to be able to describe it, to have it, for people to see it, to watch it, not price people out of the market, not prevent people from watching it on telly, then Test cricket will out-survive everything else, because it is the best, most purest form of the game.
It is a difficult mix, isn't it? Because 2020 cricket now has taken the game completely globally, if you like, in the awareness of it through, say, television, but also through radio. And more people are appreciating the game or wanting to get involved. And again, that's another important thing by bringing it to a global audience.
Yeah, I agree to an extent. I mean, I think 2020, if it's kept in its right proportion, right limits, is exciting. But like anything else, if you overdo it, then people get bored with it, because it's quite a superficial game. There's no way back in a 2020 match. 50 overs, you can't get back into a game if you have a bad start, or you lose your way at the end. You can take wickets. You know, there are ways of getting back into a 50 overs game that there isn't in 2020. Yes, you do get more exciting finishes. You're bound to, because it's a condensed game. But you still get some bad ones, you know, and the bad ones are very forgettable. It's not often you get a bad Test match. Not often you can really write a match off as having been dull and boring. Not these days. I think in the 60s and 70s, I think that's possibly the case. But not now. And it's crucial that the games authorities, administrators, wake up to the fact that if they overdo 2020 cricket, if they kill it, then that's the funding of the rest of the game finished. And there is big worries. If they sit side by side, especially in county domestic cricket, they have a really good, lively 3-week 2020 tournament that finances itself, that has its own momentum. That'll run the rest of county cricket for the rest of the year. You know, just keep things in perspective. Don't. It's all short-termism at the moment, and decisions made one year overturn the next. And you know, our administrators really have to take a big step back and look at where we're going with our game at the moment.
It is a difficult time, I would suggest, for players as well to be able to chop and change between the formats. It doesn't look particularly easy, and I guess the easy thing is to say, well, he's just come from a championship game, isn't performing well. Is that something that you've sort of noticed over time as well?
I think modern players are much better at it. I think they've got used to the fact you have to chop and change. I remember when I was playing, you know, okay, you had your county championship, you had your 60 overs, your 40 overs. I mean, we didn't have a 20. That must be quite difficult. But I have huge admiration for the modern players, especially the bowlers. You know, the variety that they've brought into bowling now is unbelievable. You know, slow bounces. How do they bowl that? I know I couldn't. Well, I probably bowl slow bounces all the time, thinking they were fast ones. But that level of skill and deception, fantastic. And that's something that 2020 has brought to the game. It's not all just taking away 2020. You know, it's brought that sort of development to it. And I do think that they do mix and match more easily these days. Kevin Peterson's an interesting one. You know, whether one-day cricket might have freed him up a bit, play a few shots, get his form back rather than going back into county cricket. One-day cricket sometimes does that to a batsman. We won't know with him, of course. But no, I think it's okay to move from one format to the other.
Of course, we're talking earlier about the biggest test of all, Test cricket, and one of the biggest tests coming up this winter is the Ashes series again in Australia, and you've been there a number of times yourself. What are England going to be up against?
Well, I think they're up against a team that will be difficult to beat at home. They'll be up against a lot of home support, although we'll take a fair amount with us. They haven't been priced completely out of it. But they'll be against a team that haven't got many bowlers. They'll be against a team with a captain who's starting to get on a bit, and people are starting to wonder if he's just lost that little split second. You know, it happens to batsmen around about his age now. And they're up against a team that they know they can beat. So you put all that together, and the fact that we have the Ashes anyway, so they've got to win one more than we have to get them back again. The first test is very important. That's where I've seen some horrors over the years.
Let's name a few.
I could start with the last one. Poor old Harmy. But the Brisbane Test, the last 3 or 4 series, has always been a disaster. And they've got to get that right for that. They will be better prepared this time. And I said they will go there knowing what they're up against, which I just think that the last time they didn't really. There were a lot of mistakes made in the build-up to that tour. And I think England will win the Ashes. I really do this time. If they play well, and that's a big if and everything else, but we need a fast bowler from somewhere. England does. That's something that concerns me, and that knocking over the tail-enders might be a bit of an issue. England does rely a lot on the ball swinging, and it might not do that very much. And they're still loath to play 5 bowlers. They want to play 4, and I wonder if that gives us enough on a long, hot day. But I just think that Australia are not nearly the side that they were. They tossed the ball to Shane Warne or Glenn McGrath and get on with it. Well, it's not like that anymore. So if England don't win the Ashes this time, I'll be disappointed.